What's up, Everione?
Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right now. Today I'm sharing an incredible story that will absolutely blow your mind. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm about to tell you about an unbelievable confrontation at one of America's top universities between a professor with a clear agenda and a brilliant student with a certified 170 IQ. Trust me, by the end of this story, you won't believe what happened. At this prestigious university, Dr. Linda Markham's advanced calculus class was famous for two things: her brilliant mathematical mind and her increasingly obvious political bias. On this particular morning, students noticed something unusual as they entered the lecture hall. Instead of complex equations, the whiteboard displayed a message: today's topic, redefining academic priorities. Sitting quietly in the back row was a tall young man in an impeccable black suit, Baron Trump. Most students didn't know him personally since he kept to himself, but everyone recognized him. What they didn't realize was that behind his reserved demeanor was a mathematical genius about to shock everyone. Dr. Markham began her lecture with unusual aggression in her stride. Mathematics, while valuable, must make space for more urgent social discussions, she declared. Students started feeling uncomfortable as she unveiled a PowerPoint about gender representation in STEM fields instead of the calculus they'd expected. Some of you, she continued, looking meaningfully at certain students, need to understand that your privileged position here isn't necessarily based on merit.
She clicked to another slide.
Family wealth and connections often create unfair advantages in education. Her implication couldn't have been clearer. Throughout this, Baron kept his hand raised patiently. Other students began looking at him, nodding slightly, grateful someone was willing to speak up. Finally, Dr. Markham acknowledged him. "Yes, Mr. Trump," she said with obvious irritation. "Do you have something to add to our discussion about privilege and education?" Complete silence fell over the room as Baron lowered his hand and spoke with remarkable composure. "Dr. Markham, calculus is essential for understanding both theoretical and applied sciences. Many of us selected this advanced class specifically to enhance our mathematical knowledge. Wouldn't reducing the core curriculum potentially harm all students regardless of background?" Several students nodded in agreement, but Dr. Markham's expression hardened. "Mr. Trump," she emphasized his last name, "perhaps you especially would benefit from understanding how privilege influences our educational system. Not everyone had access to private tutors and elite schools." What happened next surprised everyone. Instead of becoming defensive, Baron smiled politely. "You make a valid point about my educational advantages, Professor. That's exactly why I believe we have a responsibility to maintain rigorous academic standards so everyone can achieve their full potential." The professor flushed, clearly not expecting this response. "And you think you understand better than your professor how to maintain academic standards?" she asked sarcastically. "What makes you such an expert on mathematical education?" "I'm not claiming expertise," Baron replied calmly. "I'm simply a student passionate about mathematics who believes it can transcend political differences." He gestured toward the empty whiteboard. "Rather than debating privilege, couldn't we explore the beautiful complexities of calculus?" The tension was palpable as Dr. Markham slowly approached the whiteboard, marker in hand.
"Very well, Mr. Trump.
"Since you're so passionate about mathematics, let's test that passion." She began writing rapidly, creating an incredibly complex equation that made several students gasp. This wasn't ordinary calculus, it was graduate-level material involving multivariable calculus with complex integration and series expansion.
Tats graduate level Material. Somione Visperet.
This was clearly meant to humiliate. But Baron remained perfectly composed. "Of course," he said quietly as he stood up. "I'd be happy to attempt it." As he approached the front, Dr. Markham's smirk widened. She'd deliberately chosen a problem requiring techniques she hadn't taught yet. But something in Baron's confidence made her smile falter slightly. Taking the marker, Baron studied the equation with genuine interest before saying something unexpected. "Before I start, I notice this problem has multiple approaches. Would you prefer the standard method, or would you like to see a more efficient solution I learned from studying Leibniz's original papers?" Dr. Markham couldn't hide her surprise.
"You read Leibniz Original Papers?"
"Yes," Baron replied simply.
"In German."
The translations don't fully capture his elegant methodology.
He turned to the board.
"But let's allow the mathematics to speak for itself." Students watched in amazement as Baron began writing with precise, confident movements. Even more impressive was his explanation. "This initial step uses a technique Euler developed in 1755, he explained calmly. "It transforms complexity into something more manageable." Dr. Markham's confidence visibly wavered as she followed his work. Between steps, Barron paused briefly to ensure everyone understood. He wasn't just solving the problem, he was teaching it. Students began recording his explanation on their phones. Now, he said at a critical junction, we have two possible paths. The conventional approach would require another full board, but there's a more elegant method using Leibniz's original insights. Which would you prefer, Professor? Dr. Markham stood frozen, her earlier smugness completely gone. Before she could answer, Sarah Chun, a typically quiet student, raised her hand. Could we possibly see both? This is actually helping me better understand last week's chapter. Barron smiled warmly at Sarah, then looked questioningly at Dr. Markham. Her response would reveal much more than just her mathematical preference.
Just then, the classroom door burst open.
Dean Richardson, known to support Dr. Markham's political activism, entered abruptly. Linda, we need you immediately for an emergency faculty meeting about curriculum changes. Dr. Markham saw her opportunity to escape. We'll have to continue this demonstration later, she said, trying to regain control. But Barron spoke up firmly, Professor, you challenged me to solve this problem publicly. Leaving now would set a poor example regarding academic integrity. The classroom erupted in murmurs. The dean's face reddened. Young man, are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, sir, Barron interrupted respectfully but firmly. I'm stating a fact. Dr. Markham issued a public challenge. About privilege and merit. I accepted. The question is whether she'll honor her own challenge. The atmosphere was electric. Students had phones out, recognizing they were witnessing something historic. Dr. Markham was caught between her ally and her own actions. Then Barron made an unexpected move. He handed the marker back to Dr. Markham. Or perhaps, he suggested with a slight smile, you'd prefer to demonstrate your solution first? After all, as you mentioned, family connections shouldn't matter, only knowledge should. And as our professor, surely you can solve this problem you presented.
The silence was deafening.
Dr. Markham stared at the marker, suddenly realizing she'd created a trap for herself. The dean's presence no longer felt like rescue but additional witness. Dr. Markham stammered, her hand trembling as she faced the complex equation she'd written to embarrass a student. Perhaps, Barron offered graciously, we could solve it together? Collaboration often leads to better understanding. His tone contained no mockery, only a genuine offer to transform conflict into constructive learning. But Dr. Markham's pride wouldn't allow it. This is absurd, she exclaimed, throwing down the marker. This entire display is just a privileged student trying to undermine my authority. The dean attempted to intervene. Let's everyone take a step back. No, Barron said firmly, picking up the marker.
Let's move forward.
He turned to the board and, in a display of mathematical brilliance that left everyone speechless, completed both solutions, the traditional method and Leibniz's approach, in less than 5 minutes. Spontaneous applause erupted from the class. Even the dean couldn't conceal his amazement. Dr. Markham's face had paled. Her carefully constructed narrative was collapsing before her eyes. Barron turned from the board to face both Dr. Markham and the dean. Mathematics' beauty, he said, is that it's indifferent to our politics, backgrounds, or biases.
It only values truth.
He indicated his solutions. These equations reveal something important beyond calculus. They show us about learning itself. When preconceptions cloud our judgment, we miss growth opportunities. The dean cleared his throat. Mr. Trump, while your mathematical skills are impressive, you must understand that. That what? A voice called from the back. It was Michael Chun, a scholarship student who rarely spoke up. That we should learn less math because of someone's political agenda? Other students began standing. I enrolled to learn calculus, another shouted, not to hear lectures about my supposed privileges. As Dr. Markham's control unraveled, Barron did something remarkable. Professor, he said loudly enough to quiet the growing dissent, your mathematical knowledge is extensive and I've learned much from your technical lectures. Perhaps we could focus on that? I'd be happy to help other students after class, combining your theoretical expertise with practical application. The offer remained in the air, a chance for Dr. Markham to save face while actually improving the class. The dean watched carefully, knowing this moment could either become a PR disaster or transform into something positive. Dr. Markham looked at Barron, then at her students, truly saw them, perhaps for the first time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible, I've made a terrible mistake. The admission clearly cost her, but something had changed. For years, I focused so much on fighting perceived privilege that I became exactly what I opposed. Someone who judges based on assumptions rather than merit.
She looked at Baron.
You didn't just solve an equation. You taught me about true leadership. As the dean stepped forward, sensing an opportunity to frame this positively, chaos erupted outside. A crowd had gathered in the hallway, students from other classes who'd seen the viral videos being posted. Some held hastily made signs, "Teach math not politics," and "Merit over bias." The situation threatened to spiral out of control, but again Baron took initiative. Walking to the door, he addressed the crowd. "If you're here because you want to learn," he said with natural authority, "then come in. We have plenty of space." Students flooded in, filling every available spot. Dr. Markham watched in amazement as Baron returned to the board, marker in hand. "Now," he said, "who wants to learn about practical applications of calculus in real-world problem solving?" In the following weeks, attendance in advanced calculus tripled. Students came not just for mathematics but to witness a remarkable partnership. Dr. Markham, humbled by her experience, reconnected with her passion for mathematics. Baron, keeping his word, hosted study sessions bridging theory and practical application. The most significant change wasn't in curriculum but in culture. The class became known as a place welcoming questions, valuing true merit, and where learning transcended political divisions. Students who previously felt intimidated now excelled. One day, as Baron helped a struggling student, Dr. Markham approached him. "You know," she said, "you could have destroyed my career that day. Instead, you helped save it." After a pause, she added, "Your father would be proud." Baron's response revealed wisdom beyond his years. The goal was never to tear anyone down, Professor. It was to lift everyone up. Today, that calculus class stands as a reminder that genuine education isn't about power struggles or political agendas. It's about pursuing knowledge, standing up for what's right, and doing so with grace.
And Baron Trump?
He still sits in the back row, still helps struggling students, and still believes the greatest privilege is the opportunity to learn and help others do the same. If you found this story amazing, make sure to smash that like button. Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible content.
Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. See you next time.